Right. Well, my name is Michael Wood, and I obtained my Whitworth introduction, a senior scholarship, in 1953 on the basis of a thesis, which was the normal way of obtaining senior scholarships in those days. Following that, I went on to Cambridge University, where I spent most of my life teaching undergraduates, and then after so many years, they got far too clever, and so I gave up and retired. And I am now retired.
To those who may not be familiar with the scholarship, can you tell us why is it such an amazing program?
The whole program combines practical experience in workshops with an intellectual education in engineering. And it is my view that is the combination of the two which makes for really good engineers. One without the other is not a whole man. Oh, sorry, not a whole woman.
And from a personal perspective, what made you apply for it back when you did?
If I'm really honest, money. It was scholarship income. I had a research grant which was running out. I was married, and so we needed more income, and so I put in for that. But clearly, in addition to that, I had already been awarded a Whitworth Prize in 1950 on the basis of the scholarship examination, so that really I'd always had a scholarship or senior scholarship in my sights for a later development.
You may have got into it for the money, but it must have had a big impact on your life. Would you be able to tell us what kind of impact it had?
Oh, the major impact, of course, is the old boy network. You meet at, when one is quite young, you meet very senior engineers who are able to give you perspective and also contacts. I think that has been one of the really important factors in my own career development.
Would you be able to give us an example, perhaps?
Yes, one of the Whitworth presidents was called Joseph Pope, and he was Vice-Chancellor at Nottingham University. I developed contacts there. Also, Herbert Hazelgrave, who was Vice-Chancellor of Loughborough University, and again, that was a very valuable contact for me in the academic world.
To those people who are not familiar with Sir Joseph and his work, what do you think makes him an extraordinary person and an extraordinary engineer in his era?
I think it was, again, that combination of practicality and an awareness of developments. He spotted that all his friends were using different threads and came to the conclusion, as well as Maudsley, that it would be a good idea if everybody used the same threads. But his contribution was to achieve the consensus of opinion which will enable everybody to adopt the same series of threads.
And do you think that is his greatest legacy that he left, or do you think of his legacy as something else?
I think of it in two forms. There is that. There are the machine tools, of course, which he used, the gauges also, which he pioneered, methods of measurement, and also his contribution to steel making and later on to armaments. So it was a very widespread contribution to engineering. And of course, towards the end of his career, in 1868, he gave the money for the scholarships, which I'm glad to say continue 150 years later.
If you imagine that he magically appeared in the world as it is today, in the Facebook era, what do you think he would make of the world as it is now and of engineering in this modern world?
He would be enormously excited by the recent developments. I think particularly in terms of 3D modeling and 3D printing. I think that would have excited him enormously because he could see the potential not only in his own field of engineering but also in medicine and all the other allied possibilities.
And as somebody who has experienced it for all these years, how would you say that the world of engineering has changed perhaps from when you became a scholar?
Well, the biggest development, of course, has been the enormous increase in the proportion of young people who go on to university. In my day, it was possibly something like 10%, and as you now know, it's about 45%. Now that has biased young engineers towards an academic initial education, and from my perspective that is not the best way to train as an engineer. As I've explained before, it is that combination of practicality with the academic learning which is so powerful. And I believe that the best time to get that practical experience is between the ages of about 16 to 19.
Much like Sir Joseph, I think he was 14 when he started his apprenticeship. So it's interesting. And just looking outside at the industry as a whole, engineering, what would you say are perhaps the greatest challenges that it faces at the moment?
The big challenge, to my view, is again linked with young people. We have this desperate shortage of technicians. And the weakness in the whole educational system is that young people are not shown the great advantages of taking apprenticeships rather than automatically going on to university. I have had experience, regrettably, with undergraduates who had not done practical training, and they admitted in their first year they were completely at sea. They didn't know what the lecturers were actually discussing because they had no practical background.
And have you given any much thought, I suppose, to Sir Joseph himself as a person? Do you kind of wonder about who he was and what kind of engineer he was?
I think he was unforgiving in the best possible sense. I have this impression that he expected very high standards from everybody, particularly from people, and that he wouldn't have put up with second-rate results at any price.